Hi, my name is Dennis Siri. I am Executive Director and founder of the New York City Independent Film Festival, Independent in Spirit, International at Heart, and this is the New York City Independent Film Festival Meet the Filmmakers podcast. Join us while we meet this year's filmmakers. Thank you. Bye bye. Yes, hi. Today we're here with Derek. Hi, Derek. Welcome.
Hey, how's it
And
going?
please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Derek Howard. I'm the director of Not Wasting My Time, and I'm a documentary film director, cinematographer, and sometimes editor. The Not Wasting My Time is my 12th short film as a director slash DOP. And otherwise, I've shot about 45 different projects in the documentary and hybrid space. Yeah, so I mainly work in creative documentary. The film I made that's going to be at the festival is about cat rescue in Brooklyn. So a lot of the films I do myself are about kind of the underbelly of New York City. So I've made films about sexual harassment on the subway, films about fortune tellers in the streets. Now this is a look at the kind of unseen world of animal rescue in Brooklyn. So this was very much a pandemic project I did with kind of very independent during the middle of the pandemic, and just I was adopting cats from this guy, and he was a very interesting character. And I just asked him after adopting my third cat from him if I could maybe make a film about him, and he said sure. And the next thing you know, we're kind of on and off for 2 years, chasing stray cats through Brooklyn and making this kind of adventure film about that topic.
Yeah, and how many cats do you have now?
Well, it's a long story, but actually I only have one. And
Okay.
I adopted four throughout COVID, and now I only have one. So it's a long story. They're all in good homes, and there's only so many cats you can have until you're
You
officially.
only you were only fostering them. You weren't really adopting.
No, yeah, I was kind of a gateway for them to go to other people, but now I have one, and yeah,
Okay. Right. You're actually the second person I know. The editor, my editor, also has an adopted cat, adopted stray cat.
a lot of people were adopting pets during COVID.
Yeah, yeah. I have kids. That was enough pets for me.
Oh yeah, that's plenty.
All right. So, I mean, we'll start off with. So, what made you want to be a filmmaker? What was your impetus? What was your
Yeah, so I feel like I'm kind of one of the last generations of people that like studied something from a very early age and did that all throughout their entire education and then ended up doing that professionally and only that. So I know a lot of people switch their jobs many times throughout their life, but I think as early as grade four, I was already known as the AV kid who would be the one who would help with anything technological to do with cameras or photography or cinematography. So I was already at elementary school doing work with cameras. I think I attribute this a lot to my mother being a elementary school teacher, and she had access to those big old VHS cameras that would go on your shoulder with the tapes. So we would borrow those from the
use
school.
them?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we would borrow them because we could borrow them for free because she was a teacher, and we'd make little movies and we'd film our bands playing and we make a horror movie and we just run around. And so I think from all throughout high school, I had access to equipment. Very quickly in high school, got wrapped up in being the kind of person everyone asked to shoot their films. And I just continued that into my university. Got a degree at a university in Vancouver for filmmaking, and was pretty much shooting ever since I was in late high school, and I haven't stopped. So it's been now over 20 years.
So you're Canadian?
Yeah, yeah, I'm from Vancouver.
I haven't made it to Vancouver yet. I want to get there one of these days.
Oh, you
So I
should.
guess you also answer my second question. How long have you been making movies? So your whole life.
Pretty much my whole life, yeah.
All right. And there's your cat.
There's one of the cat or the cat.
All right. So um, do you find have your parents and friends, have they always been behind you being a filmmaker? Or have they
Very
when are you going to get a real job and stop all this silliness already?
I was very lucky that my parents were extremely supportive of anything to do with being in the arts. They're both creative people. My mom's a musician and my dad's a writer. So there was a lot of support in the family for that. And they never said, get a real job. It was all very like, you got to follow your dreams. I think a lot of that came from just having a middle class background and having the privilege of not having the pressure to have a job that's necessarily um,
Right.
hugely compensated, and I definitely there's not a ton of you're not chasing the dream with the money here. It really is just coming from a place of wanting to tell stories, wanting to connect with people, wanting to have a job that puts you in the real world in a real way.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, cool. I like that. I'm the same way. All
Yeah.
right. So
All right, do you have a group of filmmakers? I see that you're in New York. Do you have a group of filmmakers that is your tribe that you would say?
Yeah, there's definitely over the 7 years I've been in New York, I've definitely developed a certain tribe of people that I work with frequently. It's mainly a group of other DOPs, directors, and producers that are making films that are more like visually driven, creative documentary. So a lot of the projects I work on are not the conventional documentaries with a lot of talking heads and a lot of information and a lot of issues. There's
Mhm,
sometimes more visually driven, more emotionally driven, and more hybrid formats that don't necessarily stick into a certain label or category.
mhm,
I do a lot of work with climate change, with LGBTQ. Those are the topics that really kind of ignite my passion when it comes to storytelling. But it really is coming from a place of visually driven films. And those are the people I end up kind of rolling with in New York, is other like-minded creatives like that.
okay, cool. All right. So what made you, okay, you already actually explained what made you decide to do the movie that you submitted into the festival. But do you have any more you want to add to that?
Yeah, so again, it was pandemic time, so it was like looking for something to do that was contained, that was in New York, that was mainly outside, that was kind of safe to do. Obviously, all production kind of came to a standstill, so I had a lot of time on my hands. And then, like I said, I met this guy. He showed up at my house with three carrying bags with like 4 or 5 cats and said, "Hey, pick two." And so that night ended up with 2 cats, and then so then he came back at another time to give us another cat. And then at that point, I had to ask him, like, he's such an interesting character. You can just tell when some people, there's a story there, there's
Mhm.
something about them, their energy, the way they're talking. You know that their life is worth a look. So then, and he was very up for it. And I think it was a win-win in terms of like the film helps put a spotlight on an issue that often doesn't get a lot of attention, which is the trap neuter release and just the whole like feral animal scene of just getting these cats off the streets. So I think it was win-win because the film puts a spotlight on that, hopefully generates some good like publicity for his cause. And it was a great a journey for me. And at the end of the day, the hope is just to get more people to adopt these cats to save them from the kill shelters.
Cool. Um, so what was the hardest part of making this movie?
Well, COVID made it pretty hard because it was still in the middle of COVID, so it was really tricky with masks. I mean, you'll see in the film there's lots of people wearing masks, and it's hard to avoid that, and just the whole safety to do with that. Um, Another thing that was quite difficult is that the world of animal rescue is full of really interesting characters, and not everyone is in it for the same kind of wholesome reasons. There's a lot of strong personalities, and you come up against some people that don't like what you're doing, don't like what my subject was doing. He had a bit of a storied past, and there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of infighting in that community, so it was a bit tricky navigating that because there was people that didn't like the way my subject Stephen was working, and there was things he was critiquing about other people. So I kind of saw a little bit of this mini drama to do with like how people think, because everyone wants to help the animals, but everyone has a different idea of how to do so. Yeah, so just navigating that became a bit tricky. There's definitely some scenes I wasn't able to use, or there's moments that, it gets just a little more heated.
Okay, okay. And so what was the fun part?
Well, the whole thing was really fun, actually. And I mean, I love animals. So I think just going out, I mean, we went on most of the film takes place at night near Bay Ridge, kind of close to Coney Island, just crawling around underneath cars and hanging out with this kind of troop of different people. There's all these different feeders out there in different neighborhoods that are feeding cats. So meeting these people that are like literally going out at midnight in the middle of winter and spending what little money they have to go provide for these stray cats, there was something really inspiring about seeing people that actually dedicated their livelihood to that. Um, so that was pretty heartwarming. So the whole thing was pretty uplifting for me just to see how there are people that care about these animals. There are people that will adopt these animals and be patient to help socialize them. So the whole thing was really fun. I guess just hanging out with Steven's hilarious because again, this is a person that has a lot of interesting energy. So I think it was just fun to hang out with these strong personalities and have a mission together to kind of help in that mission. You felt useful.
Mhm. Cool, cool. So are you, oh, when you do a movie, are you happy with the finished product, or do you always look at it and say, oh, I can do more and I should have done more?
Yeah, I think as someone who like shoots my own films and often edits them, when it comes to my own directing projects, there's always that feeling of like, oh, I would have done this differently, I would have done that differently, and it's very easy to be your own worst critic.
Mhm.
So for sure, there's an element of that when you look at certain shots. At the same time, though, I am quite satisfied. I think that for me, I'm very process oriented, and the films I make, like the process of making them is completely like it gives you it gives you a reason to do it. Like it's not all about just being at a festival and having this moment of showing everyone, but like the engagement process throughout making it, the people I meet along the way, and the good that you do, that is super rewarding. So I think that that's my big takeaway. I try to be as process oriented as possible.
So one last question. Inside the indie film world, what would you say defines success? I mean, it's certainly not monetary. I mean, 'cause I make indie films also, and it's
Right.
definitely not monetary. But
No.
how would you define success in the indie world, in the indie film world?
That's a good question because I think so much of success we typically gauge it in terms of viewership and numbers and this type of stuff. But I think it's about impact and the own personal feeling you have. So for me, success is if I can look at the film after and think, okay, this is something that I personally vibe with. And even if a few people even if the cinema's not packed, but a few people come and then after they're talking to you and they tell you how much it meant to them, you know, it inspired them. So those little conversations you have with people after screenings, I think that to me is part of the gauging of success, is just how it touched individual people and the ripple effect your film has. Even if it starts small, it really does ripple out. And before you know it, many hundreds of thousands of people maybe have seen your film, and you realize that, wait, you're putting an important spotlight on a issue that hasn't been spotlighted before. So I think it's about impact. But at the end of the day, I think the success has to be gauged from yourself. It has to come from you. You can't be doing it for other people.
Okay. Okay. And what would you say to somebody if they came to you and said, I'm thinking about becoming a filmmaker? What would you tell them to do? What would be your words of wisdom, your pearls of wisdom?
I guess I would say, what is your point of view? Like, what is your unique worldview that is worth putting on film? Because making a film is an incredible amount of work, money, time, technology, teams. It's much easier to write a book. It's much easier to write a piece of music. If you're choosing to make a film, I would ask yourself, why does it need to be a film and not some other form? Like, what is the necessity of using moving images to tell this particular story? But yeah, just figure out your voice, figure out your unique perspective, like your worldview. I mean, there's lots of content out there that's very similar that doesn't really have a point of view. So what makes it unique? Like, why is it you and only you could tell that story in that way?
That's actually quite good. So your film, Not Wasting Time, will be shown on June 6th, Thursday at 10 p.m. So we hope to see everybody there.
I
And
hope so
thank
too.
you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I'll see you at the festival.